your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
Audio Jungle.
Hey, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, this week we're going to talk about medical mayhem. And this is kind of a category that can kind of go back to the origins of horror, kind of Mary Shelley, Frankensteinish, but it really centers around humans in the medical field pushing the envelope into levels they perhaps shouldn't. And there's a lot of classics that really tie into this, like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, The Island of Dr. Moreau, just a lot of historical horror, particularly in fiction and in movies, has really been based on this premise of people taking it too far.
Yeah, and medical mayhem, medical horror actually has. I think one reason it works so well is that the history of medical practices is just kind of horrific in itself due to the brutal nature of experimentation and what the human body has to go through for surgery. I mean, and for thousands of years, there weren't really any legitimate painkillers like what we know of today. And so you can imagine, it's the 1700s and someone had to get a leg amputated. That's not pretty, but if it had to get done to, keep someone alive, it had to get done. And so I think there's this natural fear of certain medical practices, like even needles. Like I hate needles, like there's just like a certain fear of a lot of the very, very practice of medicine is to keep us alive. And I think there's just this whole sector of medicine that has been horrific for thousands of years. And I think it's just embedded in people and it makes for great horror movies.
Yeah, you go back, you make a great point there. Historically, you have, people being leeched or the Black Plague. And there's just been all kinds of examples of failed medical practice. And I hate the way they call it practicing medicine. Like, call me when you got it right.
Right.
I'd like a professional, not somebody practicing. But you're right. And people suffer from just going to a regular doctor's appointment just for a checkup. There's people who suffer from white coat syndrome that really puts them on edge.
Yeah, and we see every year, you can look in the newspaper and find someone that died in surgery. They were 45 years old and they went in for surgery and they didn't make it. It's still a horrific thing that happens nowadays. And so that really translates well to a lot of these movies that just really strikes people in the heart when they're watching them.
Sure. The two movies we have tonight are vastly different in tone and in execution, I would say. We're going to start with an early David Cronenberg film, Rabid, from 1977. And this film was kind of infamous for the casting of the main character, Rose. He hired an adult film star, Marilyn Chambers. And I got to say, for a low budget early entry, she probably does the best acting in the film.
I agree 100%. There's typically a trope with terrible acting in pornographic films. And so to take someone from that industry and put them in a role like this, I was actually shocked with how good she did compared to everyone else as well. Like
Absolutely.
You said. Yeah.
Our story starts with Hart, boyfriend, and Rose. They're on a motorcycle and it crashes. And they crash down the road from the keloid clinic. And something I found odd, like no police or they send their own ambulance down.
Yeah. It almost had this the perfect bait. Like there's someone up there with binoculars, and she's like, "Oh, look, there's an accident. We should go get them." And like they kind of send their own thing, and
and they bring him back to the clinic, and Hart has minor injuries, and they kind of send him off. But they're going to use Rose for an experimental skin graft. And their concept is we're going to take flesh from another part of the body, which is normal, but we're going to take thigh skin. And if we have to put it on the face, it's not going to be thigh skin on the face. It's adaptive tissue. And we're going to make an adaptive agent so this skin becomes face tissue. So that's kind of their experimental gimmick that they're going for, which, again, most of these medical advances make sense. We just end up pushing things too far before we're ready.
Yeah, I have zero understanding of any kind of medical practices like this. So when I was watching this, I was like, sure, that makes sense. That'll work.
Well, what happens doesn't make sense, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
1 month in, Rose has been in a coma, or basically she has been out for an entire month. But she wakes from the coma screaming. And
yeah, and what's that classic slasher scream? I had to almost lower my speaker real quick. I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, and oddly enough, they have her in bed. So, in kind of a nod to her prior film experience, she's lying down a lot with no top on.
Yes.
So she is well practiced at those particular setups. But they have, like, she's laying in her bed in a coma and completely topless.
Yeah, I had thought about how it would be funny if she just did that for the scene, and like the director, like Cronenberg, was like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "What do you mean? I'm lying down in the bed for the scene." He's like, "Just run it, just go."
Yeah, isn't this what you expect? But another patient from another room, and this is, they do all kinds of plastic surgery at this clinic. So there's people in there for nose jobs and tummy tucks and various things.
Yeah, it's a private practice. It's not like a medical
surgery.
Right.
Yeah. So another patient comes in, and it's nobody she knows, but she sits up again, completely bare chested, and she hugs this man, and he emerges from the hug bloody and almost disoriented.
Yeah.
And we don't know where the blood's coming from. We don't know how exactly it happened.
Yeah.
But he staggers into another room, and the woman in that room screams and calls the doctors. The doctor, Dr. Killoyd, comes in and examines the man, and he's basically lost all feeling.
Yeah.
Rose leaves the clinic. She puts on clothes and she heads out, and we see her hiding in like a barn, like a small farm. And we see her put her bare skin up against a sleeping cow, or a resting cow, in a very odd scene. She's laying on it and almost hugging it like she was the man.
Yeah.
And we see the cow's eyes kind of react a little bit, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah.
But she turns and she comes away vomiting, makes her sick. So we're starting to figure out here that Rose is needing human blood to satisfy whatever craving she now has.
Yeah, she had kind of just stumbled out there almost absent-mindedly, like a crazy person leaving a hospital. Like, she doesn't know why she left, but there was some craving that she had, and she just started wandering. She comes across an animal, and it's not working out.
Yeah. So while she's in this barn, a drunk staggers in, and of course, she's a beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
Every guy in the movie immediately hits on her or tries to get with her. The drunk he basically tries to assault her, and she impales him with a growth coming out of her new skin that kind of grows out, and
it's like a stinger. Yeah, it's like a stinger. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great description. And so we're like, okay, now we know how the other guy was bleeding, but we still don't know where the stinger's coming from.
Yeah, it's like what's going
emerging from somewhere in her body.
Yeah. And also that other guy probably deserved it, because he was being he was assaulting her.
Yes, he deserved it for sure.
Yeah.
Her first victim, the guy who came into her room, ends up leaving the clinic, and he gets into a cab where you can see he just doesn't look right. He's not himself. He's pale. His eyes are a little like bugged, and he ends up attacking the driver. And in like one of the most horrific vehicle crashes from that era, the car crashes into another car. The cab does. It flips over. It falls off a bridge, and then is hit by a tractor trailer. It's almost Family Guy-esque, the extent of the damage that happens to this vehicle from one vehicle accident.
Yeah, this movie has an interesting way of inserting its comedy.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
Rose then returns to the clinic, and she assaults a woman who's in a hot tub, and she approaches her very seductively, very like, I'm thinking, well, okay, this is right up her alley.
Yeah.
But what she's looking for is another victim. So we're starting to figure out that her hunger is it's not like she feeds today and is okay for a couple days. It's almost nonstop. She's insatiably looking for her next victim.
It's Rabid. And I thought this scene was, I mean, comically bad. But like when she's like, but I haven't even told you my name yet. Like, but you haven't even told me your name yet. And like the woman just panics and tells her name, and then she attacks her. Like I couldn't stop. I was so cheesy. I couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah. She then, and again, it seemed to me like a play on her other types of movies to some degree, but
right. It seemed intentional, which is fine. Like I don't mind it. Sometimes intentionally bad, and it's funny to me. That works.
She gets a phone in the lobby and calls Hart because she hasn't seen him in a month, and makes contact with him. But a doctor finds her, or a nurse finds her, and brings the doctor in to take a look at her. And the doctor comes in, and again, the top just comes off, and she tells the doctor that she is a hideous monster, and she shows him a gaping mouth-like hole in her armpit.
Yeah.
And then she grabs the doctor, and the projectile comes out of the hole, and you actually see it insert into him and pump the blood out. So we keep seeing little bits and pieces till we get this whole picture of how this works.
Yeah.
And in, Cronenberg body horror fashion, it's different than what you expect. It's different than what you've seen before. It's a very unique spin on the drinking blood type of lore.
Yeah. Or it's also an interesting take on the pathogen problem from last week.
Yes, absolutely. And we get to shutdowns and vaccination cards, and a lot of things happen in this movie that really kind of, it's like modern, very COVID related, and very similar to what we talked about last week for sure.
Yeah, it subdued a lot of my expectations.
Yeah, so the drunk from the barn shows up at a diner, and he's wearing glasses, and one eye is bleeding underneath. And he fights over who gets served first, and he ends up biting a waitress and attacking others. And we cut back to the doctor. Dr. Colloid is performing surgery, and he doesn't look to be himself either. We know he just had his blood drained by Rose shortly before.
Yeah, he's not acting human. He's kind of like, huh? What's wrong? Okay, surgery? Yeah, he's like out of it.
Completely out of it. And he ends up... nurse gives him scissors, and he turns the scissors and cuts off the nurse's finger, and then he bites her and another assistant.
Yeah, he goes to like suck the fingers, and he gets tackled, and
just crazy in an operating room. But he's lost it. We hear on a news report that the drunk from the diner is now dead, but they suspect a rabies outbreak, which is, hence where they get the title Rabid. But they're interviewing, doctors and so forth. They say this doesn't behave like any other rabies we've ever seen.
Why is it always rabies? Like the crazy was rabies too. It's always rabies.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess that's the
just the most popular.
True virus that exists out there that has some of those maddening effects. Cujo was rabies.
Right, there's a lot of rabies, yeah.
But it's a real thing, so they're probably springing.
A mutation on that to the extreme. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's all I can come up with, but
it's probably what it is.
Seems to make sense. Rose leaves again, and she hitchhikes with a truck driver, and the truck driver offers her a bite of his sandwich, and she tries it and says, "Ooh, it's good," and then it cut to her pulled off on the side of the road. Getting sick again. So anything she tries for nourishment doesn't work other than what we know works. Murray is a guy we meet. He is he's on the board at the clinic, and he brings Hart back to the clinic to look for Rose. And there's cops everywhere, and now they're putting a quarantine in place at the clinic because of this rabies outbreak. And Dr. Colloid is locked up, and we see him foaming and mad.
Yeah. He's in the paddy wagon, like scratching at the window.
Yeah. Now we cut back to the truck drivers seemingly sleeping on the side of the road. Rose is nowhere to be found, and a cop finds him, and the driver has no memory of what happened, but we see the cameras placed on the passenger side, so we can see both the truck driver and the cop, and we can see blood on the right side of his neck that the cop can't see. So we get the old, viewer knows more than the other people in the scene type of thing.
Yeah. Then the cop does the most cop movie thing ever and just says, "Okay, you're bye," and just doesn't ask for any more information.
Yeah. Doesn't ask for his logbook or anything, but
nothing.
Hey, hope you feel better, and sends him on his way.
This is a narrow road. Don't park here again. See you later. And then just walks away.
The cop even makes a comment about don't you guys take pills and stuff so you can drive all night?
Yeah. Makes a self-drug inducing joke about truck drivers and then says, "All right, bud."
yeah, go ahead, get out of here. Well, of course, when the driver makes it to his delivery, he goes fully mad and starts attacking and biting people. Rose, meanwhile, catches another ride with another woman who we don't ever see her fate, so maybe she made it out okay. But she makes it back home to her friend Mindy's house. And this is where we first meet her, her friend Mindy, tries to help her. She's her best friend.
Yeah.
We also hear that martial law has been declared in Montreal, where this is where the movie takes place. And vaccinated people must carry a vaccine card to be allowed out in public. And it was, when this happened, I'm like, wow, this is 1977. And this is so very, COVID reflective of the type of thing we were experiencing.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder if that ever happened in the past and I just was never aware of it,
Yeah, true. Maybe just not in our lifetimes or that we were old enough to know about. Yep. We then find at the clinic, one of the vaccinated workers turns and ends up getting shot down, but he's basically eliminated the whole vaccination working theory. And the infection is spreading through the whole city.
Yeah.
And they're actually making public service announcements encouraging people to shoot the infected.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's funny because they end up with a cleanup crew, and there's this one scene later on towards the end of the movie when Hart is driving through town and one of the infected jumps on him, and the cleanup crew shoots one of the infected, and then they spray down his windshield. Like, "You're good to go, boss. Go ahead, man. Like, get out." Like
a window washer.
They would have contaminated his whole car. They would have, you know what I mean? It's like, no, man, you're like they were helping him. This whole movie had like little like droplets of humor throughout the entire story. I couldn't help but laugh the whole time.
Very true.
Yeah.
Rose sneaks out of Mindy's house and goes to an adult movie theater. Ironic.
Yeah.
And of course, a man hits on her, and he ends up putting his hand inside of her shirt. And then we cut to see him passed out in the theater with a hole in his hand.
Yeah.
So they do a lot of like, we didn't, like with the truck driver.
Yeah.
We see her get sick. We see him bloody. We don't see what happened in between, which I thought was very, very nice effect.
Yes, I was going to say I actually like that. They could have went over the top and tried to do and constantly done these like gory things or sexually explicit things, but I like how they did the build up, the tension build up, and then they kind of showed you the after effect, and she just keeps moving. I actually really like that.
It could be a budgetary thing, but I actually liked, like, you didn't need to see the stinger inserted over and over to get the point.
Exactly. That's another thing too. It kind of diminishes it to the audience. Yeah, I kind of like the mystery, and then you also get to use your own imagination. And we didn't need the scene in him in the theater, her groping her for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, all right,
exactly.
Like, cut to what they're about to do, and then I thought it was very well done.
We saw her shirt off plenty. We didn't need to see where that went.
Yeah.
Murray and Hart finally get released from the clinic, and Murray goes home, tells Hart to go ahead and take his car to keep looking for Rose. Murray goes to his house, and he finds his wife and his baby are missing. And this was I thought a well done scene, although not not a positive scene, but he sees blood on the carpet, and then he sees blood in the baby bath, and then the closet opens, and his infected wife comes flying out of the closet and attacks him. And you just another example. The whole city is falling apart, and
it has
family
that very
destroyed.
apocalyptic feel to it right then and there. It's like, everything's being just drowned, in this rabies outbreak.
Yeah. So Hart continues on. He's going to Mindy's looking for Rose, and Rose tries to leave again. And Mindy stops her. And as Hart arrives, we see Rose pulling the probe out of Mindy. We don't see the scuffle. We don't see, but we see kind of we see what Hart sees.
Yeah, she just has her in the mount position, and she tries to hide it real quick.
Yeah. At that moment, he realizes that she's the cause of the outbreak. And then she turns it on him and tells him it's his fault for the accident, which is indirectly true. He crashed her and made her end up in this clinic. So, again, she's a victim in all this. She didn't ask for this experimental procedure to be done to her. And this is an odd side effect from such an experimental procedure, but she's not evil. She is a victim of circumstance here.
Well, and they bring up typhoid Mary in one of the news reports. They said it could be a typhoid Mary situation where she's able to contract it, like give it to everyone, but she's not affected by it herself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And we know that to be true.
Yeah.
But the rest
she's
of the world
not malicious
doesn't
to
know.
anyone, right? Well, she is, but not in an intentional way.
So they kind of fight, and they scuffle a little bit, and Hart falls down a flight of stairs and is knocked out. And Rose goes down to a lobby where she meets a man, and of course the man's interested. Of course, she never meets a man that says, "Hey, I'm married, no thank you." But every man is interested.
Yeah.
And Hart wakes up and he goes back into Mindy's, and when he does, the phone rings, and it's Rose, and she calls to tell him that she fed from this man, and she locked herself in with him to prove she's not the cause of all this. And Hart's yelling at her on the phone to get out, and you got to get out of there. It's not safe, and he still cares about her.
Yeah, and they're having this emotional scene where she's like, "We can still be together on the phone for a little bit while we figure this out."
Yeah, but we see the man is coming to, and we see the man attacks her, and cut right. And then we hear gunshots ringing throughout the city. The cleanup continues. And we see Rose's body is in an alley, and there's people going around just collecting bodies and throwing them in garbage trucks. And she just gets thrown into the trash truck with the other bodies that are being picked up all over. It's a kind of a depressing downer of an ending.
Yeah.
But
I liked it. I
was just going to say, I don't know what else anything else you would have done probably wouldn't have rang very true.
Yeah.
She's a doomed
character. Yeah, she's a doomed character. They're all doomed characters.
Yeah. Actually, I thought this was a good movie for the budgetary restraints. I wouldn't call it great, but you get glimpses of Cronenberg's style that he would grow and develop over the years. You certainly get a look at his weird body horror fascination, where he just likes to grow stuff where there's not stuff.
Yeah,
I thought all in all, it was a pretty effective movie.
I think it's fun. I enjoyed it for what it was. I think the movie was very self-aware. Like a lot of like you said, like she goes into like a lot of the pornographic stuff. All the guys want her, or like she goes into like the theater. They have all that kind of stuff going on. But like also like when she's at the mall, the security guard comes out and has a machine gun, and then accidentally kills Santa, and the cop goes, "Oh man." Like, and I'm just like the whole thing. I just
Christmas
they're having
is ruined.
fun. Yeah, they're having fun with it. This is a Christmas movie, and it's also a pathogen movie.
It's definitely medical mayhem,
and it's a medical movie. Yeah, it's got a lot going. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a decent flick. I'm not going to call it an
Yeah,
all-time classic, but
listen,
unique.
there's no character development. This isn't a movie for the, necessarily for the story, although the story serves its purpose for what it's doing. It's an hour and a half, it's a 90-minute movie. And it kind of just gets right to the point and gets in, and then it has a good final ending.
Yeah, and I do think again we made a lot of fun of her other career and her having her top off through half the movie, but I really do think most of the time she did a pretty good job in this movie. I really thought her character rang true, other than a couple scenes. But there was some subpar acting throughout this movie, and you wouldn't point to her as the problem. She did a good job.
I agree 100%. She did awesome.
Okay. Well, our next medical mayhem movie, we jump forward to 1985 for Re-Animator, directed by Stuart Gordon.
Yeah.
And to me, this is the epitome of 80s horror. This was one of my absolute favorite movies in the 80s. I saw it over and over and over again. I hadn't seen it in years until we rewatched it here. But I think this is USA. Hey, what's 80s horror all about? Put on this movie.
Yeah. And I would agree. This movie, for some reason, I saw this when I was like 12, and I saw it with some friends, and it freaked me out. Like I was like, oh, like the whole thing just it stuck with me for years. And I didn't watch it again until I was like 20 something. And then I remember seeing it was on like late night TV or something. And I watched it again. I was like, man, I can see why this did bother me a lot. As you know what I mean? Like it was one of those things I went back, I was like, this was really like a good like 80s gore movie. It was just really well done. It's a great modern day Frankenstein.
Exactly. In fact, the sequel was named Bride of Re-Animator. So they really embraced their origins. Even though
H.P. Lovecraft did the original, and I think he was intentionally doing a modern day Frankenstein. He was trying to do that, but is in his own creative way. And this movie is it was fun.
The tone of our first movie was serious and straightforward with little winks and nods of humor here and there.
Yep.
This one's full blown over the top ridiculousness.
Yes.
This embraces the silliness of the characters, and I think Jeffrey Combs, Bruce Abbott, I think they just do a phenomenal job. Barbara Crampton, great scream queen. I think they really just embrace what their characters are, and they just go with it. And it's so over the top and fun. I love it.
It's over the top. It's fun, and the special effects are still fantastic to this day.
Yeah, it's very gory, very bloody, very very cool.
They made a bunch of these, didn't they? Didn't they have like Beyond Re-Animator?
There's three.
There's three of them. Okay, those are the three.
Three officially, and there might have been people who stole the title to make ripoffs. Yeah. I've never seen the third one, actually. I did see Bride of Re-Animator, but
I've only seen this one.
The original is the classic. It takes place at Miskatonic Medical School in Arkham, Massachusetts, which Miskatonic was often used by Lovecraft as a fake, location. And we meet med student Dan Kane, and he's bringing a body to the morgue where Dr. Hill is doing an autopsy. At this point, Dean Halsey comes in, introducing Herbert West, who's a transfer student joining the medical program. And he immediately and disrespectfully and belligerently challenges Dr. Hill's ideas about death. And he just insults him, says he's plagiarized work from other people. And this is his instructor that he's just meeting, and that's how he approaches it.
Yeah, he acts like he's a competing professor, and then you immediately find out he'd be like, "I'll see you in class."
Yeah,
it's like, no, that's your snivelly little snotty student.
Yeah, of course, West answers Dan's ad for a roommate and moves in despite objections from Dan's girlfriend Megan, who happens to be the dean's daughter. And one night, Megan, snooping around a little bit because she can't find Dan's cat, and finds the cat dead inside West's refrigerator in his room.
Yeah.
And West comes in, and he's mad, like, "Hey, I thought I had a private room." And Dan's like, "Hey, what the heck happened to my cat?" So they get a little bit of a disagreement over that. And he's like, "Hey, I found the cat dead. I was going to tell you." And, they kind of accept it as what it is. But
That whole scene is 100% relatable. Not that I've ever killed a cat, but I hate cats and I can't live with them. So, so when he moves in and kills the cat, I was like, I get it. Like,
Yeah, I wouldn't put it in my own fridge though. That's not exactly.
Yeah, well, he's crazy, Jerry.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, where's the cold cuts? Oh, that's the wrong drawer.
Yeah.
That night, Dan wakes to hear screeching cat noises, and he goes in the basement and finds West fighting the reanimated cat, who happens to be like stuck to his back.
Yeah.
And Dan grabs it and slams it against the wall, breaking its back and making a bloody mess of it. Yeah. And this movie's not one I would note for cinematography, but the whole scene in the basement, there's a pendulum light that's swinging, and the characters keep running in and out of the swinging light of the pendulum and into the shadow.
Right. Yep.
And I just thought that was really cool how it was done.
How'd they use that effect? Yeah.
And like you didn't know it was a cat. Like you couldn't see what they were after because it kept moving in and out of the shadow. And I thought, well, that's a really well done scene in a movie that's not really known for that kind of cinematography or anything.
Yeah, I always enjoy seeing creative lighting like that.
Yeah, and it, the way it moved just kind of added to the scene. The darkness was like another player in the basement.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Dan at this point said, well, the cat must not have been dead. You must have gave it something. He doesn't believe, because West is telling me he has this serum, which looks like a cross between the Toxic Avenger and Mountain Dew.
Yeah, the Ninja Turtle ooze. Yeah.
So West says, hey, well, do you agree that the cat's dead now? It's laying there with a broken back. He's like, well, yeah, of course. But he reanimates the crushed cat with his serum, proving that his serum works. And at this point, Megan walks in, which she's going to have the habit of doing at the wrong time the entire movie. She walks in and screams. So we cut to Dan is in the dean's office, and he's really ripping into him for what him and West were doing, and he tells him he's rescinding his student loans.
Yeah.
And Dan's like, well, I won't be able to afford to go to school. And he's like, well, should have thought about that. Yeah. And he tells him to tell West that he's kicked out of school completely.
Yeah. He's just so naive. He's so naive this whole movie. It's like he continuously keeps trying to hang out with Wes. And Wes is just this crazy mad person who's trying to convince him this. And like Dan's like, okay.
Yeah, you keep seeing Dan like
naively trying to
where like normal people would stop and say, "Whoa, wait a minute," and then West quickly convinced him to go a step farther.
And he's like, okay, it's very Pinky and the Brainish.
Yeah. And at every point he stops, you're like, okay, he's being reasonable. He gets talked into moving further and further. And until
just help me move this body. Come on. He's like, all right, it is in my yard. Like,
but as a med student, the only flip to that I would say is he has seen that the serum works. And the idea of being able to defeat death would be an appealing one to pursue.
And they do play that into his character in the beginning. They show how he genuinely wants to help people. Yes. Like he goes above and beyond to try and help save that woman in the opening scene. And that older doctor tells him, hey, you got to know when to stop. And he's like, no, you don't. Like, so he's actually, his character is like being fed into Wes's character because he has the same passion of wanting to help people. It's kind of just one's good, one's evil.
Yes. Yeah, agree. That's a good analogy right there. So at this point, West convinces Dan to sneak him into the morgue to try the serum on a fresh cadaver, which makes perfect sense. So he pushes the envelope, he sneaks him in there. They find the right specimen, the right candidate. They apply the serum, and nothing happens. And I found this funny, just ratio of serum. He originally puts in 15 cc's or 15 milliliters or 15 or whatever. Yeah. And nothing happens. So he wants to do a little more. He puts in 20 more. So he didn't add to it. He's
doubled it.
He doubled it and then more with the second dose, which I'm just like that. I'm no scientist, but that doesn't seem like a natural progression of adding to your test subject.
He's a mad scientist.
Well, at this point, the man sits up and just, you can see the veins are pulsing through his head, blood running out of his eyes and his mouth. And he's just a wild lunatic, and he starts attacking. And Dean Halsey tracks them down and is coming in to put a stop to this. And the man breaks down the door and has it land right on top of Dean Halsey. And he's pounding on him and he's crushing him, and then he pulls him up and attacks him violently, only stopping when West kills him by putting a bone saw through his torso. And at this point, Dean Halsey is dead.
Yep.
But West is super excited to be able to work with such a fresh.
he's constantly in that state. Like he has one mode.
Yeah. Well, this one is really fresh. Let's grab the serum.
And it's someone he hates.
So they go ahead and inject the Dean. And Meg walks in again, as she's prone to do. And he is bloody and mumbling in the corner. He's not violent like the other guy, but seems like he's completely lost his mind.
Like a hurt puppy.
Yeah. And we see him end up locked in a psych area monitored by Dr. Hill. And Dr. Hill tells Megan that he will do everything he can for him, and that he wants to do an experimental surgery if she will sign off on it. And then he hits on her in a unbelievably creepy fashion.
Yeah, which he kind of did. He's done that earlier when he was at dinner with Halsey. He kind of like made something about, he made some comment about how people become obsessed with her beauty or something, and everyone, it was just kind of off-putting. Yeah, but you kind of knew then,
Yeah, and he was saying that in front of her father, who was his boss.
Yeah.
Dr. Hill is a creepy dude.
Yeah.
So she gets upset and she refuses and she leaves. And Dan's conscience won't let it slide, so he tells her the truth. And he tells her that her dad is really dead and that they brought him back.
Yeah.
And somehow she stays with him. That's kind of, you'd think that might be a deal breaker, but she forgives him.
Well, she's going through so much trauma. She doesn't know what's up and down.
Yeah. At this point, Dr. Hill shows up at Dan and Herbert's house and confronts West and tells him that he knows the Dean is really dead and that he wants his discovery for his own. And West distracts him by having him look at the serum in action on dead cells.
Yeah.
And then he hits him with a shovel and uses that square-nosed shovel to remove his head from his body.
Which was very cool.
It was very cool. And then, of course, in typical Herbert West fashion, he can't let that be and wants to know what it would be like to try to reanimate separate parts.
Yeah.
So he injects both the head and the body.
And he puts the head in the pan, and the pan keeps falling, and he gets frustrated, and he takes one of those I don't know, they use them for like tickets at restaurants.
Yeah, like one receipts go on it.
A receipt, and he puts that down and goes, and he's like satisfied with himself. Like he did some engineering
the head keeps
trick.
flopping over. Now it'll sit up. That was a perfect example of the humor in this movie.
Yeah.
So Dr. Hill's decapitated head is talking to West and telling him he's never going to get away with it. And while he's doing this, he's engaging West in a battle of wits while his body sneaks up behind him and knocks West out. So West was outsmarted by a severed head and a headless body working together.
This is the Frankenstein's monster kind of aspect comes into play. It
gets crazy. He ends up, to move around, he puts the like a half a plastic mannequin head and a surgical mask on the body so nobody notices, and then he carries around his own head in a dish or in a medical bag, whether he needs to hide it or not.
He's at one point just walking around holding the head, and like it's a headless thing, and I fell out. I was like,
but he's guiding the body the whole time. Yet in one scene he walks to the morgue with the body hidden in his medical bag. So
Yeah.
how could he see to guide the? It makes no, but it's
I don't
just
know.
ridiculous.
Why didn't he just use the receipts, the receipt stake, and just kind of apply that?
It just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
Top-notch effects, though.
Very good effects, absolutely. Dan and Meg go to her dad, and they find him lobotomized by Hill in a procedure.
He had invented a laser procedure for that, right?
Yeah, but it was a procedure that Megan did not agree to. And West wakes up at the same time, and he finds that Hill is gone, both head and body, and with all of his research and his serums. So, this is the point where Hill took all that and he sneaks back into the morgue with the fake head.
Yeah. Yeah, the headless body steals all the paperwork and it sneaks back in.
Dean Halsey, for some reason, attacks Dan and Meg, and he brings Meg's unconscious body all the way to the morgue, and he brings it to Hill. And this is a little bit creepy in a couple different ways. He lays her on the table for Hill to work with and rips her clothes off. Now, this is his daughter, but he's being mind controlled by Hill through the lobotomy procedure.
Right.
And this is the famous scene where Hill's holding his own head in a dish, and he moves his head to her prone body. They tie her up, of course.
Yeah.
And he licks her face.
Yeah, he has the body take the head and do it, so you can kind of see the hands outstretching. Yeah.
Yeah, which, again, a really cool effect. They had to put, I was reading how they had to put the actor in so many weird positions to make this look right.
Yeah, I was wondering when I was watching, I was like, now this is like a study in like cinematography. Like how would they do this? Like I was actually thinking about it when I was watching. I was like, this must have been something else. Like how many shots did they have to get and angles?
Just the right angles to show just the right thing and not the wrong thing. But it was well done.
Keep a straight face, because I just keep laughing.
Yeah, the actor who played Dr. Hill, and I didn't write down the actor's name, but he plays it so straight.
Yes.
The whole time he's like he's in a soap opera.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. I had a soap. I was that word. Yes, you took it right out of my mouth.
But it's so perfect because it's so ridiculous. But he never wavers from playing it straight. Where you see Herbert West with the big eyes and the maniacal reactions. He's crazy.
Yeah, he's kind of almost goofy, But yeah, this guy's like you said, like he's the evil bad guy in the soap opera, and he just plays it dead on.
Yeah, and this, so he's holding his own head. He licks her face. He moves the head down. He licks her breasts, and then he finally sets his head right between her legs in a just an infamous scene that.
And the dad's kind of in the back like this, like watching. He's lobotomized, and it's just like evil. Like it's just.
It's so we know what's about to happen, but West comes in and stops him.
And somehow is the lesser of the evil in the situation.
Yes, he's misguided for sure, but he's not a molester. He's
right. Even he goes, dude, what are you doing? Like you've taken all of my infinite power that I have, and you're playing like fiddlesticks over here. Like what's going on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But while they engage in their battle of words, Dan sneaks in and unties Meg. And, we think, she's going to be rescued. But Hill had a plan. He had lobotomized all the bodies in the morgue, and they all come to life, all under his control. So the whole morgue now is a battle of Dr. Hill and his headless self, and all these corpses who are reanimated and trying to take out Dan and West.
It turned into a thriller video.
Yeah, and
they all got up instantly.
Just a mess. During the fight, Dean Halsey, Megan is calling for him, Daddy, and he finally has enough awareness to recognize that it's his daughter, and then he saves her from one of the cadavers, and then he grabs Dr. Hill by the head. And he picks it up out of the dish, and he is just squeezing, and he's going to crush his head. Yeah. And we see it slowly, blood starts to come out, and the pain and the agony. Mm-hmm. And he
eyes are gushing.
Yeah. And West gets the serum, and he injects Dr. Hill's body with an overdose of the serum, and his body comes completely unraveled. Like parts just start falling off, and his body opens up.
His rib cage is opening.
Yeah, like shutters in the wind.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that'd be a great effect to have on your porch for Halloween.
Yeah, it definitely would.
Yeah.
But somehow, evil to the end, Dr. Hill's intestines wrap themselves around West and pull him down to no escape. At this point, West is trapped. He throws the bag with his work in it to Dan to save his research. And Dan and Meg are getting out. But as they think they're about to escape, a burn victim corpse grabs them and ends up choking Megan. And Dan runs to break in and get the axe out of the fire alarm, and he finally cuts the arm off. But now Meg is unresponsive. And he brings her up to the ER, and he runs her up there, and it's an exact duplicate of the opening scene where they're trying to save the girl. He's trying to save his girlfriend, his fiance.
It's funny to go back to the Frankenstein metaphor. Like instead of Frankenstein's castle, this is all taking place in a hospital.
Yep, it's medical mayhem.
Yeah.
When we talked about this category, this is the first movie that came to my mind. I'm like,
me too.
Medical
me too.
mayhem.
I was like, we have to do Re-Animator.
Yeah. They can't revive her. She's not responsive, and the others leave, and time of death, and leave Dan. He's sad, and he's kind of hovering over her body, and then he looks at the bag. He looks at West's bag, and he pulls out the serum. Yeah. The screen cuts to black, and all we hear is Megan scream.
Yeah, just a harrowing scream, and you just what's happening next.
So it's a great ending because it's was she screaming because of what her body went through? Is she going to be fine? Is she going to be messed up like everybody else that's got the serum? They keep using this serum. We've yet to see it work correctly.
Right. But you can tell when the father looks at her and still has a shudder of life. Like there's some kind of like recognition where he knows, like he finally realized, oh wait, you're my daughter. Right. It's almost like maybe it does work. It's just not tweaked properly. Like maybe as crazy as he is onto something. It's just not done right. So yeah, maybe
the right dose, the right circumstance.
It has to be tweaked. Yeah.
But yeah, so it leaves it open ended. And this is a short movie. I think it's an 86-minute runtime. Mm-hmm. There's no fluff in this movie.
No.
But I think the characters are, for the pace of the movie, I think they're fairly well developed. We kind of get a real vibe of who Dan is and what he stands for, and same with Megan. And the big toxic mix of the whole thing is Herbert West coming in with his serum and his ideas. Yeah. But it's just a well done movie. I really, really enjoy this movie.
I think all the actors do a great job in this movie. The special effects are awesome. Like you said, the pacing is good. It's 86 minutes. It doesn't drag on. It's the set pieces are minimal. There's not too many. There's like the office, the apartment, the downstairs morgue, and then the upstairs emergency room. And there's not too much. And it's real straightforward. It's not confusing. This is just such a fun, like you said, classic. When you think of 80s gore movie, this is one of the ones that it's the epitome. It's one of the best.
Absolutely agree.
It freaked me out as a kid. Freaked me out as a kid, and then I got older and I just laughed and enjoyed it and loved it. And kids, don't watch this movie.
The scariest thing to me about medical mayhem is the what we haven't discovered yet, what may yet exist out there, what envelope is being pushed today that could take these fictionalized accounts and make a real world scenario that's even worse.
Yeah. And, that'll be real interesting when we start augmenting technology. Like they talk about people like getting computer chips put in their brain to augment intelligence and stuff like that. Or even like, nowadays, like they'll have like augmented technology for like people with amputees, like we could see something like kind of stretch out to that and like that extent with horror. I think there's a lot of room for this genre to grow.
Yeah, and hopefully, the real horrors are the fictionalized accounts.
100%.
Not what we see in real life, but
100%.
I worry about it's going to be the other way.
No, yeah, well, Who knows? Hopefully that's all in the past. I like to think of that stuff as like the medieval, like, oh, those people were savages. They did what kind of experiments to learn how to do surgery, but we think that's over with, right? And we'd like to think so, but
Yeah,
see.
well, every great step forward in the scientific and medical community seems to have been insanity before it was proven to work.
Yeah. And I think I think that that's why medical mayhem, medical horror is one of the truest of all the horror genres, because it truly has had like, I'd say, like medical and like war, like would be two of the main ones.
Because they're so grounded in reality and things that can
Yeah.
horribly go wrong. Yes.
Yep.
Agree with you.
Yep.
For sure. All right. Well, that's our take on medical mayhem. We'll be back next time with another category and a couple more movies to break down. As always, we appreciate you listening. This is the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry, and that's Matt, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Thank you, everyone.
Your Weekly Horoscope with Jerry and Matt.